That's right, folks. Another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. Today, it is Friday. What does that mean? It's the slot versus wide points per game allowed analysis here to break down some of the best matchup upgrades this week. Stay tuned for the starts, the sits, all that and more starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. Now, here once again, our favorite analyst south of the equator. By the way, I remember a few months ago, I couldn't even figure that one out. I think equator was the way I wanted to go. It's Ben Wasley down in Australia. You can follow him at Fantasy First Down, no O on Twitter. What's going on, Ben?
Look, it's a nice place to be. Honestly, it's just started spring here. I nearly turned up and forgot to put a shirt on. It's going well. We're all happy.
Nice. The man was basically shirtless. I told him that's one way to get ratings up. I appreciate the hard work, but I didn't want to exploit him that way. So I said, go put a shirt on. We don't want to be dealing with that and lawsuits. You never know. You never know. But hey, maybe we got
sort of service, yeah.
You know, you got the Taylors, you got the Swifties out there now. There's more eyeballs, you know, who knows? But anyway, honestly, today we're going to be talking about the slot versus wide points per game allowed tool on Razzball.com. If you don't know what that is, it is basically a tool we created that actually breaks out fantasy points allowed by defense in the slot versus out wide. This is a fantastic tool to help you decide which wide receivers to start every single week. I have been writing articles every single week on Razzball about his favorite starts and sits. Today's show is to talk about some of the biggest matchup upgrades that you can exploit in your player props or starting lineups or DFS. Take advantage of some values across the board. Before we dive into the slot versus wide, I did ask Ben off camera before about Garrett Wilson. So Garrett Wilson has been underwhelming. He hasn't been the elite number one first-round pick that we have thought. He did find the end zone this week, 14 fantasy points. Solid, probably wide receiver 2 on the week there. But my question is, we did look at his schedule coming up, and it looks like he has a really tough road ahead. He's only got one matchup above average out wide over the next 5 weeks, including Denver, Buffalo, and Pittsburgh over in the time frame. My question for you, Ben, is how are you feeling about Garrett Wilson? Are you willing, if your team is struggling, let's say you finish 0-3 after this week, would you dangle Garrett Wilson to find someone maybe with better matchups in the short term?
Yeah, definitely. I think even if you're not struggling, he's someone you should be selling high on. The reality is that he's got a heap of really tough matchups. His value isn't going to go up. Look, he's going to have a couple of good weeks there. They're still going to target him in the end zone. Obviously, in that game, he had a touchdown, and realistically, he could have had another one if Rodgers was accurate and there wasn't some sort of flag on the play as well. So realistically, he is going to have those positive games, which is why you're kind of ranking him up towards the top 12 region. But there's going to be a lot of weeks where he disappoints, and I don't know that you need that for your fantasy team. The other thing to keep in mind as well, the goal of all of our teams is to make the fantasy Super Bowl and win. And he's playing against the Bills in week 17, which is not a good sign. You don't really want your best players playing in their toughest matchups on week 17. So that's another reason that you probably want to be trading him away while you can, knowing that you can get another player with a little bit more of a friendly schedule. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, I think for me, if I'm gonna take a pivot to this on a 3-0 team, and I need maybe a little bit extra juice in my lineups, and I could take a couple lumps. The back half of the season, he has really good matchups. I know he does have Buffalo in week 17, but after the next 5 weeks, his schedule really opens up maybe for that final push. However, you could just wait on that advice. Honestly, let Garrett Wilson just be average over the next month. Gets all these tough matchups, and now you could potentially really get him with really good matchups rest of the way, because a lot of people won't be looking at it from a slot versus wide perspective. So I am a little concerned. I'm very high on Garrett Wilson preseason. He has played okay. The matchups really haven't been there, though. So I feel like he's going to probably be a wide receiver 2 probably for the next month or so. So I would sell if I could, but I might wait, actually. I might buy him, but I might wait a month. All right, let's get into the matchups today, folks. We're going to talk a little bit about the slot versus wide tool and the biggest matchup upgrades. Now, me and Ben decided that you guys are very smart. you guys are very smart people. You know what you're doing. You know how to navigate razzball.com. And we understand that at this point, we don't need to tell you who the top matchups are. All you got to do is follow us on Twitter. But if you go to razzball.com, you'll be able to filter on the best out wide matchups, the best slot matchups. So we wanted to take it a slightly different direction today. We have researched who had the toughest first 2-week matchups and who has the biggest matchup upgrade based on their out wide schedule. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we're excited to break down some of the biggest matchup upgrades. And we start at the top, and it's the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills had a really tough early season schedule. They only allowing a 12 fantasy points out wide the first 2 weeks, the matchups they faced. This week, they get a huge matchup upgrade against the Jaguars, who averaged 28 fantasy points out wide over the first 2 weeks to wide receivers. It includes two 100-yard games two 100-yard players to Waddle and Hill in week 1. And I know Amari Cooper underwhelmed, and me and Ben are Amari Cooper guys who are still trying to figure out what the hell's going on. But Jerry Jeudy, 5 for 73. So the question is, in a much improved matchup this week, is Keon Coleman a wide receiver 3 in your mind, Ben?
I think the biggest concern for me about the Bills out wide receivers is they haven't needed to use them. They just keep running the ball. They give it to James Cook and he rips off a massive chunk play. They give it to Khalil Shakir over the middle. They use Dalton Kincaid a lot. They don't need to use their outside receivers. And this doesn't feel like a game where they're going to be chasing the game. They really need to throw the ball. This feels like a situation where they're probably going to be in control most of the time. So I don't know that even though this is a good matchup, we're actually going to see them have success. I know they can take on the big names of guys like Monteric Brown and things like that, who you can definitely target, but we haven't really seen it from Keon Coleman. And until I see it, and trust me, I was higher on Keon Coleman than anyone else in the preseason, but until I see it from him, I can't put him back in my lineup. You'd have to be pretty desperate before you're starting these guys. And you're definitely not starting Mac Hollins outside like a 32-team league or something like that.
Mac Hollins is probably going to be the guy who scores the touchdown. So we'll all be super excited about that. Listen, he's getting the targets. I mean, he's getting the routes. He's out there a bunch. He's leading the team in routes. And I think at this point, the other thing with Jacksonville is they are much better versus the run. That's what they're a pass funnel defense. That's how it's been over the last year or so. And they have been a little bit stingier against running backs just strictly on the ground. They do allow pass catching running backs a decent amount of production. So maybe James Cook can beat them that way. But I do think that Keon Coleman, this is the matchup where if he does not give you wide receiver 2 numbers, there's really no point having him on your roster at this point, especially if you have a shallow league. So I think that he's got to produce. And I think he has the talent to do it. And I think he's been on the field. Sometimes these rookies don't even get on the field. So the fact that he's on the field is key. I think he has a good week. I think it could put him as a top 36 wide receiver in this matchup. And I also think Jacksonville can, compete a little bit with Buffalo. So I do think there's going to be some points in this game. All right, let's jump down to the second one. And it's a 49ers versus the Rams. Now, obviously, this game is just full of injuries. And, CMC, Kittle, Debo. You got the other side. You got Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. This place is just madness. But you still have very good quarterbacks. And so the quarterbacks are just going to have to work with the guys they have. And one of the guys that's still on the field is Brandon Ayuk. And I think a lot of people, when you're looking at the situation with the San Francisco 49ers, early season schedule, the 2 opponents on average allowed 18 fantasy points out wide. This week they face the Rams, who are 30th, folks. 30 fantasy points out wide. So it's a huge matchup upgrade. Jamison Williams, 5 for 121 and 1. Marvin Harrison, 4 for 130 and 2. Is the buy low window on Brandon Ayuk about to slam shut? Ben, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's going to have a very big week this week. I'm ranking him in my top 10. I mean, realistically, who else are they going to throw the ball to? I mean, it's not going to be a whole lot of Juwan Jennings. We just know that isn't their style. So I think we're going to see a lot of Jordan Mason. I think we're going to see a lot of Brandon Ayuk. And look, those targets are going to add up, I think. I think he's the kind of player you want in your lineups, but more specifically, you want on your roster, because after this week, it's going to be really hard to get him into your team.
Honestly, I have nothing else to add. Honestly, this is kind of the time you just play around. See if you can get him on your team. Inquire. Everybody should be inquiring about Brandon Ayuk. By the way, this guy held out the whole entire summer, and he was not on the field. So we already knew there was going to be a ramp-up period. And so it's kind of like expected. I actually am not surprised he got off to a slow start. Now there's nobody. It's literally just Brandon Ayuk out there in the receiving game. So I think this is the week. Go inquire. Doesn't hurt to ask, folks. You don't have to give a bad offer, but just ask the owner. Like, hey, how you feeling about Brandon Ayuk? Just want to ask you really quick. All right, quick questions. We got some questions in the chat. We got Jamie, of course. What's up, Jamie? How you doing? Also, Tyler comes in, Sperry, asking us for a start sit. And by the way, this is a good time to plug. Every Sunday, we do a 2-hour start sit show between 8 and 10 a.m. PST, or that is 11 to 1 o'clock if you're on the East Coast, folks. In Australia, I think it's like 1 to 3 a.m. or something.
1 to 3 a.m., yeah.
Yeah, so if you're up there.
That classic time on a Sunday night, yeah.
The huge spike in the Australia audience. People just can't sleep with the excitement of the Sunday live start sit show. So join us at the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. Ben will be on again this week. We're excited here. So make sure if you have start sit questions to join us on Sunday. And by the way, we'll have all the data. We'll have all the injuries. We'll have all the weather updates. And so we can make a really informed decision this early in the week. We don't necessarily have all that data yet, but we can still answer your start sit questions, Tyler. So here you got Shakir Odunze and Naylor. He wants to go Shakir Odunze. I actually agree with his assessment here. What's your thoughts here, Ben?
I just don't think you can start Jalen Naylor. I don't. I think it's not reliable enough. I think we don't know what's going to happen in that offense. He's had touchdowns, and that's how he's gotten by. You've got to start Shakir, and you've got to start Odunze. I think Shakir is probably the one of those two that I prefer.
We'll be talking about Odunze in just a little bit because he has an elite matchup this week. And I think Shakir, at least, I know Jacksonville is a out wide funnel defense, but how you beat them, they get crushed by wide receivers. So I think Shakir has proven enough in PPR format to get you close to double digits. So I'm okay with that guy as well. Jamie just wants to throw extra shade. It wouldn't be a show without Jamie throwing some shade here, and we appreciate it as always, Jamie. He says, how have you not figured out what's going on with Cooper? Seems obvious to me it's Watson being dog crap. And by the way, that's true, but he was good with Watson last year, so I don't understand what happened to Watson. And you watch the games, and there's just something off with his attitude. Like Cooper is just, he must be over the shit because he's out there with this like kind of this nonchalant attitude. Like he's just like, again, another bad throw, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just wondering what the hell happened between the two because last year they were playing pretty well. Ben, any thoughts about this before we move on?
I mean, he was getting passes from Jeff Driscoll and Dorian Thompson-Robinson last season. I mean, this is an upgrade relative to that. I know that's a low bar. So that can't be the only issue. They didn't have Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore, or at least a functional Elijah Moore last season. I just feel like the targets are getting spread too much. So, look, this offense needs to definitely take steps forward. They need to stop running the ball needlessly so much of the time and actually just start to get the offense moving properly.
You know what I heard? I heard start Jameis Winston, baby. Let's go. Let's get some fuel to the fire, folks. That's all I heard. It would be awesome. I'd be buying all the Amari Cooper if that happens. Jamie, last one here, folks. He talks a little bit, by the way, Jamie on the site using the tool. That's why we love you, man. Looking at the slot versus wide, the 49ers are allowing 65% of the fantasy points. Now, this is a really great way to use the tool as well. We do break it out by percentage of fantasy points, and sometimes it's just about how much of their fantasy points are coming from the slot versus out wide versus just the total. Because if you're trying to find maybe the guy of the Rams, for example, to start, Whittington is the guy who plays a lot in the slot. Now, this could be something interesting. He does have McLeod, who the Falcons this week. Falcons, right? Slot receiver. Who's McLeod again? Yeah, slot receiver. Falcons. Yeah. Sorry. Or Mooney as well, going up against Kansas City. The Chiefs, by the way, are very good against receivers, but at the same time, the Chiefs put up points, and then you always end up with some garbage time. And then when you have a guy like McDuffie, who is probably going to be a lot on Drake London, you could see the other guys playing pretty well. What's your thoughts here, Ben?
I mean, it's a valid point that Whittington's going to be mostly playing through the slot. You'll still get like Demarcus Robinson there maybe a third of the time. But look, Whittington is the slot guy, but I'm not even convinced that he's going to be playing like a full set of routes. I feel like he's not going to be out there on 11 personnel. And they're also going to take him off for guys like Tutu Atwell. We saw that Atwell gets targeted when he's on the field as well. So I don't know that you can trust Whittington given the way that we don't know how they're going to use him. So until we know that Whittington is like an every down player, and I don't think he is, I don't think you can put him into your fantasy lineups. In fact, I suspect in most leagues he's not even on the roster.
Yeah, the other thing too with Tutu Atwell being on, Tutu Atwell is a very small guy. They're not going to use him on the ground game. Whittington is a big guy, and I think the Rams are going to probably have to run a little more than they usually do, and I think that's what's going to get him on the field. Then you got Stafford in play action. I actually like him. I actually think, yeah, if you're desperate, he's probably more of a DFS, have a little fun kind of play versus your 12-team, wide receiver 3. But I actually don't mind the matchup. The 49ers, if the 49ers weren't so banged up as well, I just have faith that the quarterback play is going to elevate everybody around them. So I actually don't mind it. But I actually would pick Mooney, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right. The third matchup out wide upgrade this week is the Bears. So DJ Moore and Rome Odunze, the great news for them on top of all this is Keenan Allen will be out. So that means that a couple more targets could go to those two guys. Odunze was a full participant, not on the injury report. So that's good news for him as well. Early season, the two opponents averaged about 16 fantasy points out wide. This week, it's 25 fantasy points out wide as they face the Colts on the road in the Dome. Not too bad. Nico Collins, 6 for 117. Romeo Doubs and Wicks. And by the way, I tweeted this out. On 14 pass attempts last week, the Indianapolis Colts allowed 14 out wide fantasy points on 14 pass attempts. That is special. I got to tell you, only on 14 attempts, they figured out a way to get in the end zone and over 100 yards between Dobbs and Wicks. So I do like the matchup. What's your thoughts here, Ben?
Yeah, I like the matchup as well. DJ Moore was one of my clear starts this week. A lot of people are starting to ease off him because he's had 2 bad weeks. I know that Caleb Williams hasn't looked fantastic, but he's a rookie. Be patient. Rookies take a while to get going. DJ Moore is definitely going to be good this week. And I like Rome Odunze this week as well. I think he's got real touchdown upside, got good target upside as well. Look, you can target the Colts out wide. They don't have Juju Brents at the moment. He's injured. They're starting guys that you haven't even heard of. Realistically, these are the sort of matchups that we should be targeting. This is a good way to use the tool, essentially.
Yeah, so the other thing, too, is they're really banged up front. DeForest Buckner is banged up. So like these guys, the Colts are just a team that can be exploited across the board. So I really like DJ Moore this week. Rome Odunze, I don't know. I almost feel like there is a world where Rome Odunze might get more time inside, and which could help. I know that's Kenny Moore's territory, and we don't want to see that. But I haven't seen enough from Caleb Williams to feel like he's going to support two wide receivers this week. So I would probably err more on the caution and just go with DJ Moore. But at the same time, like I don't mind. I'd rather start Rome Odunze in a plus matchup than just start anybody random. You know what I mean? So I'm okay with the Odunze if you have to as well. All right, let's go to number 4 with the biggest matchup upgrade this week. It's the Falcons receivers going up against the Chiefs. By the way, when we talk about this stuff too, it doesn't necessarily mean the matchup is great. The Chiefs are still pretty good against receivers. It's more of an indicative about how tough the Falcons' early season schedule has been so far. Drake London and Darnell Mooney majority play on the outside. Early season, the two teams they face only allow 13 fantasy points out wide. That is very tough. This week it's 19. Still not good. But the Chiefs are going to put up points, and that's kind of the key here. We have seen, Darnell Mooney actually get a little bit more production so far. So what's your thoughts here? Is London going to get the treatment, the shadow treatment? Does Darnell Mooney intrigue you? What's your thoughts here, Ben?
Darnell Mooney does not intrigue me. I don't trust that production. I wouldn't say it was garbage time production, but it was certainly late in the game production when Cousins just randomly decided, we need to go down and score. I'm going to start passing the ball a whole heap when they hadn't been doing that all day, and they'd been trying to establish the run for most of the game. So I can imagine a situation here, certainly where they're playing a little bit of catch up, but I don't know, the Chiefs' defense is still pretty good. This is not exactly a fantastic matchup. London is someone that you have to start. I'm easing away from Mooney, and I'm definitely not starting McLeod either. I still think they're players with upside. I do think this is an offense with good matchups that could really get going. I think there's a lot of talent here. I like the system that they're using. I just think that this is not the week for it.
Okay. Yeah, the Chiefs have allowed 80% of their fantasy points out wide this season. That's 4th highest rate. And by the way, here's an interesting nugget here. McDuffie, PFF has credited him with 27% of his snaps to the left side, 37 in the slot, 23 out to the right. If they want to use him, they'll use him anywhere. So I am a little concerned for Drake London. And I actually, I'm going to call my shot this week. Darnell Mooney puts up wide receiver 3 numbers. I like it. I'm playing him in DFS if I can. All right, number 5, the biggest matchup upgrade out wide is the Denver Broncos. The Broncos are facing the Bucs on the road this week. It's kind of been a tough sledding for these guys. Cortland Sutton, Josh Reynolds have led the team in out wide snaps so far. Early season, 9.2 fantasy points. That is absurd. Tampa Bay is not much better at 13.7. This is going to be a tough matchup either way, but we should see maybe a little more. This might be more of like, watch those player prop lines. Maybe the receiving line for Cortland Sutton, the yardage might be good here. But Amon-Ra St. Brown, 11 for 119, plays about half and half. Jameson Williams, 5 for 79. Any interest in the upgrade for the Broncos?
I mean, Cortland Sutton's someone that I think in some leagues you could consider starting, especially a half PPR league, because he is going to have that bigger play upside. This is a better matchup. I think that he's someone that you still need to have on your roster. I don't feel good about starting him most weeks, but if you're going to start him, this is one of the weeks where you would. Josh Reynolds in a deeper league is someone who's a viable option as well. I know a lot of people play in like 14, 16 team leagues, especially leagues where you're starting a lot of wide receivers. I think Josh Reynolds becomes viable in that situation this week, especially now that they've got Devon Vele back. A lot of people getting excited about little Jordan Humphrey. Calm down. He's not even the starter this week. It's okay. Look, Reynolds, solid deep league option. Sutton, you have to be a little bit desperate, but certainly an option even in a 12-team league.
Yeah, I'm actually not overly excited about this one, folks. I know this is we like to bring this up because it is its own upgrade, but it's still a shitty matchup. I mean, I know last week that Amon-Ra really beat him up and Williams got his, but be honest with you, the Bucs will be at home. I know they're going to be missing some key guys. Vita Vea is also going to be out, the defensive tackle. That's huge news for maybe Javonte Williams. And maybe the ground game has a little more success against that Bucs front, but I don't know. I don't know if I trust the rookie on the road, so I might be fading my own analysis on this one, folks. All right, we're going to talk about downgrades really quick because you know what? I'm tired of the positive vibes. All right, I want to take a trip to negative town here, folks, and talk quickly about some downgrades that I want to get Ben's feedback on. The first one is going to be the Buccaneers at the Denver Broncos. Early season schedule out wide, 22 on average fantasy points allowed by their opponents. Now they go all the way down to 12 against the Broncos. DK Metcalf, 3 for 29. George Pickens, 2 for 29. Mike Evans probably getting the Patrick Surtain shadow this week. Are you fading your Bucs?
This is the first time since early last season that I've had Chris Godwin ranked ahead of Mike Evans. I do not like this situation for Mike Evans at all. Having said that, he's still a top 20 wide receiver. So unless you have very strong wide receiver cores, you still have to start him and you have to start Godwin as well. Just lower your expectations a little bit. And certainly if you're in a situation where you need upside, where you need a lot of points, you're probably not going to get it from these guys. I think their upside is a lot lower than it usually would be because this is not going to be a shootout. This is not going to be a situation where they need to throw the ball a lot. They're going to be able to run the ball a lot. We know they like to run the ball when they're able to. We know the Broncos will want to grind the game out. We know that Evans is going to be covered by Surtain a lot, and that's difficult. So I think they both have touchdown upside, but while I don't want to start them, I think you probably still have to in most leagues.
Yeah, and historically, Denver has been pretty tough against the slot. And I know that maybe they know they have Patrick Surtain on the outside, and they just take away the middle of the field. Otherwise, they have allowed they're 28th in fantasy points in the slot allowed. So they're pretty tough. So these guys are both probably just wide receiver 3s. This is a scenario where these guys are typically borderline wide receiver 1s. They're still going to put up close to top 30. There's going to be very rare situations where you could sit them for a streamer. But maybe Ben has a couple streamers at the end of the show, but he probably won't sit them for them. But I actually do think that you're probably starting because we talked last week, George Pickens, or just Wednesday, not even last week, could have had a bigger day, against Patrick Surtain. So I can't sit Evans ever, and Godwin's white hot right now. So just maybe downgrade them to maybe a flex wide receiver 3 in this matchup. Let's jump down to the next one. It's Dolphins at Seattle. Not only do they lose Tua, but the Dolphins are now traveling to Seattle to face the Seattle Seahawks. By the way, Seattle Seahawks might be and I think, Ben, you brought this up. Was it you yesterday or Wednesday? They brought up the Seattle Seahawks defense. Yeah, when you said that, I go, yeah. Oh, yeah. And they're home too. They're going to the upper West Coast. Seattle. I picked up Seattle everywhere. I'm starting them over the Chargers. I really like that for against Skylar Thompson. But not only is Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle dealing with a tougher out wide matchup, but now they're going to be dealing with a lesser quarterback. So far this season, average 18 fantasy points out wide versus their opponents. This week, it's 10 against Seattle. Seattle is probably one of the better out wide toughest out wide matchups this season. They shut down Cortland Sutton and the Pats wide receiver. So maybe it's an opponent-based thing so far. But what's your thoughts here, Ben?
Coming into the season, I thought there was a possibility we might see Jalen Waddle in the slot a lot more. We certainly started to see that a little bit in the preseason. That just hasn't happened. We've seen Tyreek Hill more in the slot than we've seen Jalen Waddle. It's been really weird the way they've used him. They do move him around a lot, but I don't know. The Seahawks are really strong out wide, and you can run on them. And we know that the Dolphins love to run the ball, and we know they're going to need to run the ball. And I think probably if Raheem Mostert's back, then they definitely do run the ball. And we see also a lot of checkdowns to Devon Achane. This feels like a situation where it's probably going to be a really big Achane game, and you're not going to see a lot out of Hill and Waddle. Hill will still get his targets, and he'll get his opportunities because they just have to use him. They know what they've got in him. They don't need to do that with Waddle. So for me, you have to start Hill, but you definitely don't need to start Waddle. This is probably one of the lowest rankings I'll have on Waddle ever.
Yeah, I'm out on Waddle. We saw this kind of show 2 years ago, and Waddle really got hurt by the Tua injury. Yep. Tyreek always finds a way. I would not sit Tyreek Hill. The irony is this is the week where Tyreek has probably like 3 for 35, and Waddle finds the end zone. I'll just yell at the screen for an hour and a half. But anyway, my point is I'm going to sit Waddle if I can, and I'm probably going to be okay starting Tyreek Hill. All right, let's jump out to the next one. It's the Giants wide receiver, a.k.a. Malik Neighbors, playing against the Browns. And the Giants have had a very nice schedule to start the year, 24 fantasy points allowed out wide for their two opponents. Drops all the way to 15 against the Browns this week. Brandon Cooks did find the end zone, but only 4 for 40. Brian Thomas had 94 yards on 2 receptions. So it does seem a little boom or bust here, folks. If he doesn't find the end zone, what's your thoughts about Malik Neighbors? Are you downgrading him this week?
Yes, but there's so few options to move above him that he still kind of sits in the top 20. I don't want him to be in the top 20. I want to move players ahead of him. But there's really bad wide receiver options this week. And I had the same issue with a number of players, like with Jalen Waddle. I want to really shift Jalen Waddle down. There's no one I can move past him. It's the same thing with Malik Neighbors. I don't like this matchup. It's just he still ends up in the top 20 because there's not a lot of good wide receiver situations this week. Neighbors is still the clear number one option. You have to start him. It's going to be ugly and it's going to be concerning. So lower your expectations on Neighbors, but you probably don't have a better option.
T. Higgins or Malik Neighbors?
Neighbors. I don't even trust that Higgins is going to play a full set of snaps. I don't think you can trust Higgins this week, even though it's a fantastic matchup.
DJ Moore or Malik Neighbors?
I'd start Moore.
Zay Flowers?
I've got them back-to-back because Flowers I'm also a little bit nervous about this week. I'm not really sure what to expect from the Cowboys. I would probably start Flowers.
Last one, Calvin Ridley.
Calvin Ridley is a terrible matchup this week against the Packers. I feel like that's going to be a really run-heavy game, so I'm not starting any Titans or Packers wide receivers.
Okay. All right. There you go, folks. Now we're going to join back to the same game, Seattle Seahawks versus the Miami Dolphins. The early season return for the Seahawks, 13.7 fantasy points out wide. That's been a tough schedule for them. The week 3 opponent does not get much better. The third fewest fantasy points allowed out wide this season. We got DK Metcalf. You got Tyler Lockett. Are you fading these guys this week?
I think we've learned that you just have to start DK Metcalf. I mean, he was absolutely crazy last week. I'm starting him regardless. I know it's not a very good matchup. I know they don't need to use him, but I mean, they're a little bit banged up. Zach Charbonnet, I don't know how many carries they can give him when they don't have Kenneth Walker available. We're going to see a little bit of JSN as well, but I'm starting Metcalf definitely. And Tyler Lockett is someone that I've eased back on a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, this is another one where the Seahawks play better at home. And I honestly would love to pull up our tool right now because we do have home versus road splits on the website. So I just don't want to spit out random facts that aren't true. Metcalf averages 16 fantasy points on the road, 12.5 at home. So I'll just shut up now. All right. So
He's really
Don't
good.
know. I know. Well, it is what it is, man. Sometimes, the stats don't back up the thought process. That's all right. That's why we have the tools. All right, folks. Anyway, last one before we close out and answer some questions here. We have the Jags playing against the Bills. Of course, Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis. Brian Thomas has figured out a way to have some productive weeks the first two weeks. Early season, though, really tough. By the way, these are guys that over the next few weeks we have to talk about because their early season schedule has been brutal. 11.8 fantasy points early season, and now they have an even tougher matchup this week against Buffalo. It only allows 8 fantasy points out wide, which is freaking absurd, by the way. Marvin Harrison, 1 for 4. And then we all thought Marvin Harrison was terrible. Nope, he just faced the Bills. The first week it faced a really good matchup. Second week, Tyreek Hill, 3 for 24. Waddle, 4 for 41. Are you fading your Jags this week?
Yes. And to be fair, I've been kind of half fading them anyway. I feel like there's so many weapons there, and Trevor Lawrence is not passing the ball a lot that doesn't really make sense to start them most weeks. Christian Kirk's been a real disappointment. I don't fully understand what's going on there. I know there's a snap count issue, but I don't know why they're limiting him. I don't understand what they're seeing in Gabe Davis that's making them go, this is the guy we want out there catching a lot of passes. We've seen him be good in this situation. I don't understand that thought process, but that's what's going on. So for that reason, they're all down for me. Every Jags player is down this week. I hate this matchup, especially for the wide receivers.
Christian Kirk had a lower leg injury to start the preseason. It lingered. He did not. That could be a part of it. But to be fair, last year we didn't get a chance to really see the Zay Jones, Calvin Ridley, and Christian Kirk trio on the field. But when we saw limited snaps, he was the wide receiver 3. So, and Evan Ingram, I know he's not playing, but we saw what Brenton Strange last week, by the way, my start of the week at tight end, if he gets a opportunity to start. There's just a lot of competition, and he's not getting these snaps. And on top of the injury, you might be right. We should probably just take a break and give it a beat before we get him in your lineups. All right, let's do starts and sits of the week, Ben. Before we close and jump over to some questions, I know, listen, you work tirelessly. Ben's in the lab looking at these tools, and I want to give the man his floor to talk about his article, talk about some starts and sits. The floor is yours, my friend.
Let's start off with some starts, eh? So, look, some of them are obvious. We already talked about Brandon Ayuk. We already talked about DJ Moore. Another start that you might not be expecting, really high on George Pickens this week. I know that you think, well, look, he's had a tough start to the season. The Chargers have been really good out wide this season, and the tool says that they have. And this is where you've got to be a little bit aware, especially early in the season. The Chargers have played against the Raiders and the Panthers, who don't really have any good outside wide receivers except Devontae Adams. That's why they've been so susceptible. Last year, the Chargers were very susceptible, both out wide and to the slot. Combined, they conceded the third most points to wide receivers last season. So for that reason, I really do like George Pickens this week. He was actually very good against Patrick Surtain. I know that the box score didn't show it, but he had a 50-yard reception brought back. He nearly had a really long touchdown. He could have had over 100 yards, and he also had a lot of flags against him, which created yardage for the team as well. So I think George Pickens is going to be great this week. I'm also quite high on Demarcus Robinson, which a lot of people aren't, but you definitely attack the 49ers with your wide receivers. And Robinson, for better or worse, is actually their number one wide receiver, and he has a lot of touchdown upside. So if you need somebody, and we've talked about streamers, Robinson is one of my favorite streamers. If you're in for a little bit more of a desperation play, Andre Yoshivas against the Commanders, really good in the red zone. So if you're in, especially a half PPR or non-PPR league, and you just need a chance at points, I think Yoshivas is the chance. The fact that T. Higgins is back is going to hurt him, but he's still an option. And Greg Dortch against the Lions. The Lions are very poor against slot receivers. Dortch, he has his boom weeks, and I feel like for the Cardinals, this could be a big boom week for Greg Dortch. On the other side of things, sits. We already talked about the Jacksonville guys. I already talked about not wanting to start any Packers wide receivers. Waddle's down, but for me, the other guy you definitely can't start, Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin against an improving out wide Bengals secondary. They just can't work out how to use him. And that kind of makes sense because they've got a relatively passive quarterback who likes to run the ball and check it down a little bit. Still a rookie. They're still kind of getting him involved. And that's not Terry McLaurin's game. They're trying to forcing him to play underneath. He wants to get deep, and they're not giving him that opportunity. I think as the season goes on, that will start to happen because Jaden Daniels actually has a pretty nice deep ball. He's just a little bit conservative with it. And I feel like at times we'll start to see that happen. It's just that hasn't occurred yet. So you definitely can't start him. They're the main guys for me this week.
Yeah, I would say I want to just call out to Brandon Cooks. Always plays better at home, and Baltimore is a big time wide funnel deep. Marlon Humphrey's now playing a lot in the slot. He's going to probably match up a lot against CeeDee Lamb. They're dealing with some injuries to Nate Wiggins, who might be back this week after practicing limited. But I like Brandon Cooks. He's always played better at home. It's like a weird thing. And that's the same thing with Dak, too. So if you're looking for a desperation wide receiver 3, I like Brandon Cooks. All right, let's do some starts and sits. By the way, as a reminder, folks, if you haven't followed us at the channel Razzball Fantasy, make sure you jump over to IG and TikTok. And, of course, make sure you jump over to razzball.com. We have great content, great tools to help you start your start and sits every single week. And make sure you join us every Sunday live for the Start Sit Show as we answer your start sit questions for 2 hours every day, every Sunday before kickoff. All right, we got sit 1. We have Gus, T. Higgins, Akers, and Thomas, half PPR. What's your thoughts here, Ben?
Ew is my thoughts. Assuming that Joe Mixon down, I think he is. I think you probably sit Gus Edwards this week. That's not a nice matchup. I don't feel great about Akers either. I don't feel great about most of these guys realistically, but if I had to sit one, I would sit Gus.
I like Akers this week. It's going to be gross. And when he fumbles after he's going to have 6 carries for 32 yards, and then he's going to fumble, and they're going to bench him. So
yeah. You're going to see a good Wasley an annoying amount of the time.
Yeah. No, listen, and when you're looking at the matchup too, Minnesota, based on my adjusted line yards matchup metric, it's a top 10 matchup. So the line should be able to get the ball. I mean, Akers just looks like a natural fit in the offense. It's just that he fumbles all the time. Like the Rams a few years ago that's where they couldn't do it anymore. They're like, we're done with this guy, but he can run the football. And I think that the Texans are going to use him. So the problem with me is that the Chargers have not faced anybody yet. Now they're going to be on the road against Pittsburgh. I believe it's at Pittsburgh, right? Or am I? So this is going to be their first true test. I'm concerned. And Thomas, same thing. I mean, he's going to be having a terrible matchup out wide. It's half PPR. Give me T, Akers, Thomas. I'm sitting Gus on the road. All right. Got Jamie jumping in here. Obviously, Surtain has been great, so I'm also lowering Evans. That's a good call. We agree. Neighbors in a world of hurt this week. Neighbors outside your top 24. Not according to Ben, though. Ben still got him in that top 20, correct?
Yep. He's in my top 20. Yep. Well.
Yep. So we got Denzel Ward has allowed just 2 catches on 8 targets, breaking up 4 passes. That's the Cleveland Browns matchup potentially this week for the Giants. So I obviously picked up the Browns defense. They're playing at home. I actually have them. If you can get them, that's one of my favorites. Honestly, Jamie, at this point, just really picking on Malik Neighbors. I mean, honestly, at this point, I don't even know if I should read the tweet. I'm not going to read the comment, Jamie, because this, as a Giants fan, I feel like you're just doing this now. Now you're doing this to upset me. I don't really care about it. Tyler missed the answer to my question. Wow, Tyler, I appreciate accountability. We appreciate your accountability, my friend. And by the way, it was Shakir over Odunze or Naylor. I'm actually going to go with Odunze over Shakir this week. That's it. That's my call. Jamie, Tyler, I believe they said Shakir. Okay, he's already taken care of things. Let's see.
Jamie's our tiebreaker for all of these things. So
yeah, Jamie's our tiebreaker, so that's fine. Shakir gets 2-1 on that. Honestly, we'll see. Something about the Odunze connection with Caleb seems to be better than what's going on with DJ Moore. I don't know. I got to look at the numbers to back that up. This is just like me spitballing that. But honestly, at this point, in the limited time, 17 targets, 1189, Odunze 3 for 44. Yeah, I guess I was wrong, but whatever. Anyway, that's all right. We fact check ourselves on the spot. I don't know why I was thinking that maybe it was the first week and maybe DJ Moore just blew up because everybody was out last week. I don't know. All right, that's all we got today, folks. Make sure you follow us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. And, of course, make sure you jump over to razzball.com. Before we close the show, Ben, tell the people where they can find your content and everywhere you write your stuff.
If you want a full deep dive on my starts and sits, where I basically go through all of my rankings in a deeper form, then check out the Fantasy First Down YouTube channel. If you want to know more about wide receiver starts and sits, go to Razzball, check out the article. Got heaps of good content there. I talked a little bit about it today, but there's way more detail on the article. Plus, as always, check us both out on Twitter because we are dropping all sorts of juicy nuggets. And I'm looking forward to staying up till 2 a.m. to talk about start sits on Sunday morning for you guys. Very late Sunday night for me. I'll be watching the Singapore Grand Prix. Then I'll be staying up to talk about some football. This is a good weekend for me, honestly. I'm actually pretty darn keen.
That sounds pretty good to me, my friend. All right, folks, thanks for joining. We'll see you Sunday. We are out of here.